Good evening to all our participants, to all attendees, and also good morning to all the people who've joined from Canada. Thank you for being with us on this webinar. Okay, so I think the webinar hasn't yet started. Okay.
Nadira, we can't hear you. Your voice comes in and out. Just keep that in mind.
So let me begin again. And just want to say again, good evening to all attendees and participants from India. And good morning to the Canadian participants. Very, very happy that you're able to join us. So today is the second of our series of ICBC webinars. We started last week with Rakesh Nangia, and today we are very privileged to have with us Mr. Deepak Bagga, the MD and CEO of Invest India. Deepak, thank you for your time. We know that you are very challenged time-wise with so many demands on you at this time. And thank you for joining us. But we are very keen to share with our members and friends and guests what is the the real, the economic scenario in India at the moment, especially with our Canadians as to whether how the investments or what is going to be the future for investing into India, for doing business with India. And we think you're the ideal person with all your experience and background to be able to guide us at this juncture. I'd also like to welcome Sanjeev Mittal, who is the head for Scotia Bank in India. Sanjeev has also been the past president of the Indo-Canadian Business Chamber and is very active Indo-Canada corridor by means of his relationships with various stakeholders. Sanjeev, very happy to have you here. And
privilege.
Thank you. I'll hand it over to you, Sanjeev, to please take on and ask Deepak a few questions. And here in the background, whenever you need, for whatever purpose or reason, I'm here to back you. Over to you, Sanjeev.
Thank you, Nadira, for your generous introduction. And a warm welcome to Deepak, and most grateful to him for sparing his evening with us. A very warm morning to our colleagues in Canada, and evening for our colleagues in India. I hope Nadira and Deepak just doing a sound check. My voice is clear and absolutely you can hear me loud and clear.
So can my neighbors, Sanjeev. Don't worry. The neighbors in the entire colony are gathering with your voice.
I get the hint. I get the hint, Deepak. Deepak, we are all grappling with the COVID scenario. In the current global scenario, how has Invest India recalibrated its efforts overall, especially on sectors like manufacturing, automobile, and information technology?
Thank you, Sanjeev. Hello, everyone. And Nadira, thank you for organizing this. Do we have Ajay Khanna? Has he joined? Has he been successful?
I'm just trying to get it. I'm just going to speak to him.
Let me know when he joins. There's a reason why I want to say that.
Sure.
But let me just say that, Sanjeev, you were talking about morning and evening. One of my learnings of lockdowns is that you forget which are mornings and evenings. The team has been working 24/7. And I must say that is true for virtually everyone we know what is happening.
That's correct, Deepak. Absolutely.
So Ajay is on, Deepak.
Okay, and the reason why I wanted to say that, Ajay, thank you very much. And I want to publicly acknowledge that Ajay and his team have donated a large part of PPE equipment to Delhi Police today. So on behalf of all of us, Ajay, thank you very much. And please thank your team for doing that. Coming back to COVID, guys, we all know the most unprecedented situation ever. And somebody put it really well yesterday. I was on one of these webinars, and they said this is the first time in history that every individual is a weapon against you. And in some way, it was very disconcerting to hear that one. And look at it from our perspective. It's not a country, it is a subcontinent which works at various levels, various discontinuities, and economic, geographic, every which way. And just imagine putting a lockdown in this situation. It is an unimaginable task. And what you have to think and understand is the ability to take a decision to be able to get it on time. It's not an easy decision for any government. And thankfully, we did do it on time, because if you look at the numbers, I'm sure we would like them to be much lower. But at the same point of time, we do feel that we are in a situation which is well contained today. The nature of this is that we do not know what can happen. It changes by the day. There's no playbook. It's completely unprecedented. So you can try and foresee in the future what will happen and keep yourself prepared, but it is always there to surprise you. So which are the new hotspots coming in, on how it can go about? And keeping that all in mind, I think when the Honorable Prime Minister said that life and livelihood have to go together, but life is very critical. If there is no life, there is no livelihood. And I think the stress on first
Indeed.
protecting lives, and especially so in the short run. So we've been through about 2 weeks of it, a little over 2 weeks. I think the next 2 weeks are very critical. We've shown in the past 2 weeks that we've been able to keep ourselves well in control. And I think if we continue doing that successfully for the next 2 weeks, we might be able to see how we've got the better of this entire challenge sitting in front of us. One interesting thing we did, and this actually, I must give full credit to my team on this one. So if you recollect, our lockdown started on the 23rd. On the 21st, midday, when we were having a team call of all hands, they said, sir, we need to get a special platform on for any businesses which will require help at this point of time. So I would urge everyone, please go on to www.investindia.gov.in. And on that, you'll come to a business immunity platform. And I'll tell you the reason why I'm doing that. This got launched on 21st evening at 7 o'clock. It was initially just for businesses to send in their issues and we could sort them out. It was for startups and MSMEs to get lessons or to share their thoughts with people who are well done in their businesses on how to go through this crisis. And it was supposed to be a common place to get all notifications into it. If you go through the evolution of this platform from day one till today, and you will have a daily report, you will see the evolution of this crisis. How this crisis has evolved, how the government on a daily basis has been reactive to it to sort out issues. And I'm going to request my colleague Vivek is on it. He will share with us some of the experiences they've had. And I must say the team has worked 24/7. So it started off with a lot of logistical issues. I remember the first night, we got a call from a company which was 500 trucks across the country carrying inflammable material, saying that if the sun rises tomorrow morning and you don't let them go to shaded places, they're going to burn. So all night the team worked to move that in the lockdown to see how that happened. To companies which wanted to check, do they qualify to be essential equipment or not? So that can they remain open or not? Helping their employees to get curfew passes at all across the country. To having a bread making company at 2 in the morning calling and saying, my trucks can't enter a city and there'll be no bread in the city. So we had all these kind of issues and coming together with the government to get solutions for these issues on a wartime footing. So what we saw is that the mix of those queries which came in, we've done over 3,300 queries, which started with a lot of logistical support. Then the ones asking clarification on notifications increased. Then the ones on medical supplies increased. We are looking for medical equipment, as you know, PPEs, gloves, masks. And then the special team got created, which started working with MSMEs, which started working with startups to get the technologies, which started working with, let's say, a textile manufacturer to help him make masks and changing their product lines to helping raw materials to be sourced from overseas. And in the current context, our friends from Canada would realize it's not easy because there are not too many places we can source all this equipment from. In fact, we are all going to the same source. So all these things and a special team got created to do that. Then we had a lot of people like Ajay, what he did, where the company is coming forward and donating and saying, how can we help in the process? So we created a special team to work with the corporate side to see how we can bring in their support into this effort. And let me say, no government in the world can do something on this on its own. It has to be done by social society, all of us put it together. And full points to the business community. And a lot of our friends are on this call, and I can see that, who have supported us in this entire effort which is happening. So where are we now? there's a lot of discussion that what can we open up now as we go forward. The risk reward scenario is that you want economic activity.
Deepak, we seem to be losing your voice.
Can you hear me now?
Deepak, can you hear me, please?
Yeah,
I can hear you.
I can hear him also very clearly.
All right, okay, please continue.
So the choice now is, and that is for every government, between getting economic activity as fast as we can, and at the same point of time, protect all lives. The objective is to save each and every life which we can. So we are now working out strategies which we are suggesting to the policymakers of getting experiences which we've had from some other countries on how they had a red, green, and amber, on areas which were completely unaffected to areas which were affected, areas and sectors which could be opened up gradually. What was the protocol to open them up? So there is some learning which we are picking up from overseas. There's some learnings we've had internally. And I think all these are going back into the system to see how that can be done. At the same point of time, there's a lot of effort going on to see how we can contain the entire issue as we see it. There will always be the next 2 weeks are the chances where we can have numbers increase. And as I said, another very stated clear objective of the government is to see how do we contain that? How do we contain the number of hotspots? And how is it that we manage the situation within those hotspots? So both those objectives are there. At the same point of time, there is another angle, and which is when you go on to that platform, which I tell you, you will see various pieces of this puzzle being put in together. And one of them is the business reconstruction team, which is where we are looking at how do we reconstruct the business in the immediate future. And also what we are seeing is that this is also creating a significant number of new opportunities. I've already started getting a large number of queries, especially in the past 4 days, from corporates across the world, which are looking at sectors like medical equipment, etc., to create a manufacturing base in India, which is what they're wanting to do. And to create a base, not just for India, but as an export base out of India. With the same objective, you get the economies of scale, which is happening. We are also seeing interesting queries, and surprisingly, even during this point of time, from countries where they're looking to see how they are willing to move their existing manufacturing capacities and supply chains closer to the market, so as to speak the market which is India for them. Somebody says they've lost the audio. Can you hear me? Sanjeev, can you hear me still? Okay, thank you.
I can hear you. Sanjeev, can you hear?
Yes, I can.
Oh, okay.
So that is another set of queries we've started getting already. And we are also now putting it back into the system to see what is it which we can do special for these sectors going forward. Now, immediately, we are looking at what are the financial packages. How is it that companies and governments across the world are going to see, and how do they come out of it? It's unprecedented in the sense that we've got both a demand and a supply situation occurring together. Both the shocks have come at the same time. And let's also face it, that there's a huge economic crash out of this entire system. One of the basic fallouts of that has been drying up of liquidity. So you have a demand and a supply shock at the same time, and at the same point of time, liquidity being squeezed out of the market. So you have a three-pronged situation, which is what any policymaker would be looking at. And that is what one is trying to structure out within that segment. There are two elements. How do you get jobs back very quickly? And the other element, how do you get the economic activity moving as fast as you can? And then there's a third element to it. The third element is that there are a number of sectors, and with the queries which we are receiving now, and we had actually received even before the situation had begun, where we can see ourselves taking a much larger play on the global field within those sectors. Could that be in electronics? Could that be in auto? Could that be in pharmaceuticals? On medical equipment, as we spoke about? Could that be in something to do with food processing? So similarly, there are a number of other sectors where we are seeing a huge opportunity. And that is where the strength of the Indian innovation and the startup sector comes in, because that is where they tie up with the entire MSME part of the community. And that brings in the supply chain movements, both upstream and downstream, where these projects are concerned. So I personally foresee that economic activity, and as we've seen the latest IMF report, India has probably shown there, I'm not saying that number is big, but one of the, actually a handful of economies around the world which will still have a positive economic growth. I was on an UNCTAD call last week where they said they believe that world trade and growth will go down by about 40%. Now, within that shrinking of the world trade, how is it that we can support that entire growth for the world and create supplies for them in the most efficient manner? So that will be the other part of our business reconstruction team, which is what they are looking at in the current context. And that is where, both for the immediate recovery as well as the long-term recovery and taking on to those new opportunities, do we work together with all of us on this call. You guys have a big role in this one. And this is also a time where we can look at some of the new areas which we all can focus on, including some of the existing areas. I'll keep myself quiet now. I'll wait to hear from everyone because that's what I'm here for. Thank you, Sanjeev. It's all yours.
Thank you, Deepak. I'm sure the website of Invest India and the link that you mentioned, we'll hear it from your colleague. But if you would be kind enough to repeat that once more for our guests who are online, and then I will come to the second question, please.
Deepak, sorry, I got the voice back. I'd lost everything. So I'll just request you, just go into the investindia.gov, that's government, gov.in. And on that, you will find is the business immunity platform. By the way, I must tell you, so the World Bank today got in touch and they are looking at it as a case study by itself.
There it is.
And the World Association of Investment Promotion Agencies has suggested that it's a gold standard. Is my senior colleague, and Vivek heads our entire initiative on the Western world, including Canada, and for the entire outreach. So we have a special dedicated team for Canada because Canada is very critical to us, as you know, and their entire business interests. So Vivek, are you there? If you are, if you can hear me, could you share some thoughts on what has been happening on the platform and the kind of queries your team has been handling? Is that okay, Sanjeev?
Sure.
I don't think Vivek can hear us. Maybe we'll pick that up later. Sanjeev,
Sure.
I'll let you take it on.
All right, thank you. Deepak, what would be your advice in the current scenario to the Canadian entities?
Sanjeev, we can't hear you. Sanjeev can't hear you at all.
Deepak, what would be your advice to Canadian entities? Can you hear me now?
I can hear you very barely, but tell me if I heard that you're looking for Canadian. What is my advice to Canadian entities?
What is your advice to Canadian entities in
Yes.
the realm of FDI, which we call foreign direct investment into India in the current scenario?
Okay. So my first is for all those who are with us already in India, just bear with us for another 2.5 weeks. 2 weeks actually. Share with us any issues which you are facing. Don't wait, just let them know immediately to us. We will handhold you. There will be companies which fall into the essential category. which will have got the permission to keep themselves open, to keep their operations going. And in getting those operations off the ground, any issues which you have, please let us know. We are with you. The second is, there is going to be a new world post-COVID. Let's face it. I think it's going to be a huge watershed scenario for the entire economic world and for all of us, even individually. What I see there is number of business models getting reorganized. I see new opportunities, but I see a number of business models get reorganized. I also see countries like India, for instance, trying to see how fast they can come up and increase their economic growth and getting the jobs off the ground. And in that process, you will see them taking measures which are extremely business friendly, which are there to plug the situations which create an ease of doing business easier for the private sector. Because unprecedented times do come up with some very unprecedented measures. And this is one of those situations. And that is how I see it happen, because that's what I see internally. Creating jobs is going to be critical. I would urge each one of you, for all your payroll which you have in India and otherwise, and I'm sure this is true globally, and I'm sure you're trying to do it, but just a request, try and see whatever you can, that those, especially the ones at the bottom, those are extremely critical. I do see a lot of economic activity picking up, be it on the infrastructure side, be it on a large influx of liquidity into the system, which is what is required. And if you have any suggestions which are specific to your industry or your region, I would urge Sanjeev and Nadira, both of you, and either through them or to us, please bring them to us as quick as you can. This is the time when we take them back into the system. One of the most interesting things which I've noticed in this government during the past 2 weeks, morning till evening, we've had virtually every senior functionary of the government, including ministers and including the Prime Minister, having stakeholder meetings non-stop, getting actual suggestions from the stakeholders themselves to see what is required. So this is one of the most promising elements which is happening. And this is what also gives a lot of faith and trust that what is it which the government and the stakeholders want is going to be handled and be done as the part.
Okay.
And that's what we do. So more than happy looking. I somehow have seemed lost voice. I can't hear anyone.
Deepak, I can hear you, although albeit with a little bit of a gap, but I
Now
can
I
hear
can
you.
hear you.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, so
Now
Deepak
it's
and
okay.
Sanjeev, once Deepak, would you like to also, because there are a lot of questions coming in from the Canadian companies. So would you like to ask, I think Sanjay Deshpande and Arunakar Mishra have sent in some very pertinent questions. So Sanjeev, if you think it's okay, then maybe we can take a couple of questions.
Yeah,
Yes,
of course,
please do.
Nadira, go ahead.
So I think, we have said, one is of course from Rakesh Nangia that Deepak, can we expect a timely economic package for the industry? Businesses need support very badly. Okay, these are from Rakesh Nangia, but I think the other ones that I was also wanting to come from Arunakar Mishra, he says, do Canadian companies have any offset commitment to India? Can we use it for buying services from Canada? There's another question. Can Startup India team help startups with financial loans without collaterals?
Okay,
So,
some interesting ones. Rakesh
yeah.
bhai, interesting question. We are also, there was just after at the beginning of the situation, there was a package which was announced, which was a very quick band-aid one. And now the government, as I mentioned, has been working very closely with stakeholders. And I'm sure during the course of the next very few days, you will hear of the next one coming out. One very interesting and important thing, Rakesh bhai, in getting a good package is understanding the depth and the gravity of the situation. Either do I give you a crocin, an antibiotic, or do I give you a steroid? And that you will only get to know once you have the depth of the entire situation. And then you understand with your good doctors, which are our stakeholders. So that is all what is happening. And I'm sure in the next few days, you will hear of another set of packages which will be coming out to see what is it which we can all do together to get this economy going. On the startup thing, if you go onto our website, you will see, so we have partnered with SIDBI, the Small and Industrial Development Bank of India. And there's an emergency package which they've come up with that is typically for startups and MSMEs, where they're willing to grant very short working capital loans. And a significant number of them could be without any collaterals, but you might want to go through the exact requirements of those schemes on how they are doing. In the same point of time, as you know, the first announcements which had come by the government was spacing out on all your payments back into the financial system. And there has been spacing out of those. That is to get you a temporary quick relief from whatever the situation is. And let us see how the next set of packages come out on that one. Then there was one about the offsets, which was happening for Canadian companies. There's a specific set of clauses on how those offsets have to be governed. And I think they stay. We haven't seen any exceptional changes on that one. But if you have any specific suggestions on how you want to see that part which you want to utilize, please share it with us. We will take it into the system and see what is possible.
Thank you, Deepak. Then, of course, we have can Startup India help startups with financial loans without collaterals?
So I just mentioned that one, that we have a package with SIDBI, and SIDBI is looking at that. And also, I think we are working on some suggestions. We've had a number of consultations with the entire startup community. They've given some of their suggestions, and that's all being mulled into the package as what we are looking at. Let me tell you, startups remain one of a huge point of focus for all of us, for the government, and for all of us in the private sector and the government together.
Okay, so I think Sanjeev, would you like to ask any more questions from Deepak from your side? And I'll take a few more questions from the audience again.
Sure. Thank you, Nadira. Deepak, to your point on which you very well articulated about after COVID, I guess there's a new terminology being talked about, that we are talking about a new BCAC before COVID and after COVID in the current scenario. On in terms of how people are looking at their businesses. We, in any meeting that we have internally, or externally, there is always a BCAC situation that this phrase is catching. To your point on the new normal, I should say. Can you also, Deepak, briefly cite some examples how companies are contributing to mitigating? How companies are contributing to mitigating the damage done by pandemic. You gave a very good example of our friend from Jubilant, and if you have some more examples, it would be very good for people on the call, on the webinar, to know how people are doing. Some of us, we all know what Tata Group has done and other groups have done, but from your perch where you sit, you will be having a pan-India picture, and hence your steer would be very much appreciated on that, please. Thank you.
Sanjeev, this has been the most interesting part if you go through my business immunity platform daily report. In fact, this report is now being picked up by 50 countries as we speak on a daily basis. And you know why I say that? Look at that at the medical supplies bit. It is amazing. So one is first the innovation level, how companies and small innovators and startups are coming up with solutions which are required currently. So be it, for example, issuance of curfew passes across the country. Initially it was a big issue for the first 48 to 72 hours. Indeed. I remember the number of calls and the queries we got. And we had a startup, and I must say it here. So HCL also, Mahindra Tech came forward overnight, created a platform for the Delhi police. And then we have a special task force group within the government dealing on logistics. And by the way, just to digress a little, there are 11 task forces created within the government to look at each aspect of the current situation and also recovery out of it. And our teams are working, Invest India teams are working very closely with virtually all of these task forces. So going back to that, so first was the innovation bit. We've had a number of companies which have come up with very interesting miracle innovations. And what we are doing there is helping them develop that technology on a fast track, getting them in touch with, let's say, larger companies, be it, let's say, a BHEL or other PSUs and private companies, to get them the manufacturing capability of doing a fast track on creating that. The second very interesting one which has happened, I've had textile companies, I've had hosiery makers coming and saying, tell us quickly, how do we make masks? Get us the technology, get us that chemical which is required, get us the textile material which is required to make the bodysuits, the PPEs. And for example, one of the things in the PPE suits, which is very critical, is the piping. The piping is the one which adjusts the pieces of cloth together. And that has to be completely foolproof so that no bacteria goes. But we had another company come up with an adhesive very quickly, because piping is very short. We don't have piping in India. It was very short and we needed to get it imported too. So these are all interesting situations which are coming up. And what we are seeing there, and that is a large example of that you will find when you get onto the website, a large number of companies coming forth and changing their existing business lines to help in the current scenario. We've had companies which are reopening their factory cafeterias to take care, for example, of a large number of the stranded labor which is all over the place. So they're coming in many ways. Ajay's company, for example, came forth and said, we are more than willing to support anything which is required. You tell us. We told them PPEs, they got it bought and brought it here. Another set of companies are buying it from overseas and sourcing it for us in India. Sourcing it is a huge challenge in the current context, and bringing it here. And similarly, companies internally. So there's some amazing stories. Vivek is with us. He could share a few, but more importantly, there are all some very interesting ones on the website. And the moment we get out of this madness, I'm sure you will see these stories more out in the press.
Thank you, sir. This is Vivek here. So we've seen a lot of companies pivot their business models from the startups like your delivery startups delivering essentials. We've seen a lot of auto companies look at manufacturing ventilators. We have a number of people in the tech space who are donating their research minds and actually creating new business models. We have an amazing example of a computer services company who has built a modular ICU and is now using that as a pivot for a new business line. Of course, we've been guiding a lot of them. There have been numerous requests to us on how they can contribute to CSR and how they can help in the effort. And we have actually worked with a lot of them to ensure that they've reached the right person and the request is connected.
Thank you, Vivek. Sanjeev, back to you.
I will take a pause here. And why don't you have some of the panelist questions to Deepak, please?
Yes. So again, I think we have another question which says that, we are going to be having a problem that with the demand drying up, there'll be serious lack of liquidity, which will force businesses to the corner. They're looking for government support at this juncture. Can you see, is the government thinking in this direction?
Of course, please, it's not even a thought. Everybody is extremely cognizant of the biggest challenge, which is liquidity being out of the system. And as I said, both demand and supply have been hit at the same point of time. So we need to get that economic activity back. We need to get those jobs back. And that is where the entire focus of the government has been. And that is where the government has been working relentlessly in stakeholder consultations non-stop. You can actually check with all stakeholders. And that just to get their feedback on what do we do to make it happen quick. So that is happening, and it is happening on a very active way. And I'm sure everybody is trying to see what is maximum which can be done in an unprecedented manner for this unprecedented situation. So please keep that in mind, especially for the very small business, the micro and the MSME. There is a huge focus and a sense of sensitivity which sits within the entire system and the government.
Thanks, Deepak. There is Sri Ganesh Rao, who says that post 21st April, IT companies are allowed to work with 50% of the staff. But what would be the process for applying for the company-wide pass for the employees? The current procedure is for the earlier order, where only 2% were allowed, the employee passes were available. Would there be a new procedure for the post 21st April relaxation?
So what is happening specifically on the passes? Some of the state governments have already adopted overall all India parcel portal which is issuing these passes. But for your specific areas, you can either send a query to us or you will be told by your specific areas how it will be done. Also, many states, the existing passes have automatically been extended. So you don't need to go back into the system for the existing passes to be reissued. So there are a number of these things happening and that's being looked at on a state and a region basis on whatever is simpler for them to be adopted. So I think we more or less, to a large extent, the stress which we had in the first few days of the issuance of passes is now easing out. I'm seeing far less queries coming on that subject. And if you have any specific challenges, please reach out to us on the portal.
Yeah, sure. There's also Varish has said a question. Is there any plan to set up a country desk for Canada on Invest India web, on the Invest India website?
So Rajesh, we already have a special team and Nadira knows that team well and Vivek heads that team, which is dedicated to investments and all of you from Canada. And Vivek, do you want to speak a little more about it?
Yes, sir. So we have a 3-member team looking at Canada, and we have been working with ICBC and all the other organizations that have been working on the India-Canada corridor. Happy to have this conversation with you on building a dedicated microsite like we have for the other countries, and take this forward.
Yeah, thanks, Vivek. I think Sanjay.
Nadira,
yes.
Can I just add on to what Vivek said? So
Please,
just for everyone, just to let you know how Invest India works. So on the investor side, our teams are in 3 verticals. We have state verticals, we have sector verticals, and we have country verticals. So as Vivek said, there are 3 people dedicated to Canada. That is from the country team. That country team then hooks into the states team and also hooks into the sector team. So if you have a food processing query from Canada for West Bengal, you will have 3 people from the country team, a person from the food processing team, and a person from the West Bengal team, all 5 of them working in a matrix to get it sorted out in an ASAP manner. So that is how we are working internally within the team. Thank you, Nadira. Please.
Yeah, thank you. So there is also from Koel Ganguly, which says that the current export from India on medical PPP has stopped. I believe that will open up in a few weeks so that companies can look at exporting from India rather than from other countries.
Of course, Koel. So the fact is that as of now, you know what the emergency situation is. And there is a huge requirement, as we all know it. But going forward, this is going to be a huge business proposition. As I mentioned, I'm already having queries of a number of global companies. In fact, just before this call, I finished up with one of them, which is already importing machines for PPE equipment, which is going to be starting here to make it a global hub. And it's one of the larger companies which was doing it from another country, which is now wanting to do it from India. So it is not just for this situation, but even looking at it as going forward a business model for the entire world. So in that context, there'll be complete support, and obviously exports, etc., will be a huge market for them.
Thanks. There's one question before I give it back to Sanjeev, if he needs to address you. This is from Sanjay Deshpande from Clearford Group. It's a Canadian company. He says, in terms of ensuring liquidity, can we look at tweaking GST rules so that the GST payment can be made after payment received instead of on invoice.
Sanjay, very interesting. Why don't you send it to us? I mean, it's ideas like this, you never know which ones can work out. So if you have a thought and you can just develop it a little more on how it will help you if we take this into the system, and doesn't have to be too long, just about a paragraph or two, and how it will assist you, please share it with us. More than happy to get it into the system and see how far we can take it. So with immediate effect, just send it to us. Thank you for that thought, Sanjay.
Okay. So, Sanjeev, anything more that you would like to ask Deepak? And
Sure, Nadra. Thank you.
A few more questions.
Yes. Yeah, sure, Nadra. Deepak, you mentioned about metrics team. I just wanted to, before I come to supplementary question, I think from a user perspective from Canada, it would still be a single point interface in Vivek, who will then connect with the multiple people internally to make sure that there is single face facing our colleagues in Canada, right?
Absolutely. There's a single point of contact, and that is how we make it happen for you.
Thank you.
May I? Sorry, Sanjeev. Can I just add?
Of course.
So,
yeah, Vivek.
We've got our team members on the call. Shruti and Sayam also listening in. So all three are here to take all requests from Canadian companies coming to India.
Excellent. Thank you, Vivek.
By the way, Sanjeev, just 1 minute. There was a query on those passes. Shruti is the one which is working very closely with the government task force on that one. Shruti, do you have any thoughts on, they had suggested that how will they get the passes and what you've done so far on the passes issue?
I think, Shivani, if you can unmute, please. If you can unmute Shruti.
Yeah, there.
Yeah. So, good evening, everyone. So we've been working with Ministry of Consumer Affairs on the e-pass that has been proposed. A lot of the states have already taken that up, and any other and the idea is that each company, the larger companies that have a huge supply base, they will require passes, and so the state can give the passes to the organization, and in turn the organization can give a set number of passes to their employees as and when they require it. So a lot of the states, for example, Delhi has implemented this. And if you have any other further questions on this, please feel free to reach out to us after the call, and we would be happy to take you through this.
And also, if you have any issues after the date comes in, please just reach out to us. Shruti and the team have done a miracle where this entire smoothing out of this process is concerned. So you'll be happy to get some response there. By the way, I've lost everyone. It seems I'm yet all alone and lonely on this call.
Yeah.
No, Deepak,
we are all here. We are all with you, Deepak. Yeah.
Always a pleasure to be in company. Thank you.
Yes. Always there for you, Deepak. Okay. So, Sanjeev, anything more that you'd like to speak? Or
yeah, just one final point for Deepak's consideration. Can you please provide some insight on the forthcoming economic growth plans, which would be useful for domestic as well as Canadian businesses? You'd like to share with them, Deepak?
I've given some thought. I mentioned something, Sanjeev. One is, let us in any case wait for some government announcements in the next few days.
Indeed.
And my suggestion would be that if you have some interesting thoughts, industry specific or region specific, which you would want to share with us and take it back into the system, especially if you have businesses in other countries and you found them to be useful, do share them with us.
Will do.
But I think you should let the package come out. Let the set of thoughts which have been shared so far between the stakeholders and the government come into a fruition for all of us. And then let's have this discussion yet again. And in the meantime, share with us any thoughts which you have.
Yes, thank you, Deepak. And before I complete my set of questions, since you have been on the both sides, you have been now an insider in that sense to the government, and you have been on the other side as well, where all of us are on the corporate side. And today being the big meeting where the FM met the PM, would you, without taking the thunder from the package, would you like to give people on the call any insight that we can look forward to what is going to happen tomorrow? Maybe tomorrow's headline news.
So, my astrological skills are not yet good, though I do have been told that Mercury and Saturn have moved into a certain position. And if I had better ones, I'll be able to give you more insight into that. But being on both sides, I must tell you one thing, Sanjeev. I have never had to work as hard in my life
I know
as in the past few years in this job. So, the private sector that way life was a little more easier. But what I must say, what you will see is a lot which is being looked at to see how, and this is all come back from the stakeholders. So it's not somebody sitting and coming up with this package. All what is being worked out and has been worked out is solely and totally based on stakeholder interaction. And each and every sector and stakeholder within that has been touched and their views have been taken into account to make it happen. So keep that in mind.
Thank you, Deepak. Back to Nadira.
Okay. So Deepak, thank you very much because, your work and your efforts have certainly paid off. So I must say that, it has been very beneficial to us that you have moved into this sector from the private sector. And Deepak, what would be your advice? There are a couple of things that I may sound a little confused. I'm a layman, but I would really value your advice on this. Is that, that the Korean and Japanese companies have been advised to move out of China and they may be looking at, at India as a destination. Maybe even the Canadian companies would may look at India. So, but I mean, especially for us as a we are very concerned with the SMEs. There are the SMEs in Canada which have been looking for JVs in India. They have been, they're in the midst of seeking it. Also, we have a lot of our Canadian pension funds and Canadian investors into India. What would be your advice, number one, to the SMEs who are looking at India that, possibly there would be a lot of, something given to them as a benefit or, what would be the benefits of investing in India? And also to the big investors, the pension funds, to the big companies as to an investment destination, keeping in mind this COVID-19 situation and also keeping in mind that one can't really predict much about the future, but you have been with the government planning, deciding what are your views and what advice can you give to the Canadian companies?
So let me first tell you very specifically, and I'll stick myself to Canada. Nadira, I believe that in the next 24 months, Canadian exposure in India will be at least 3x or 4x of its present amount. I know it's a big number, and I will stand by it, and you will watch it. The other day, Nadir and I were speaking, and I mentioned the same thing to him. And I'll tell you why I say that. And I mentioned it once in your earlier meeting, which you had with a few other companies. Investment is based on 3 pillars: business to business, people to people, and government to government. It's one of those very few relationships, and this goes from both sides, where we have strength in all these 3 pillars. Frankly, to my mind, and that is what we have internally discussed it several times, we've not even scratched the surface of the investment potential on this corridor. And that is about, I was speaking to Mr. Basaria, Ajay Basaria, who's not just our ambassador there, but is also a good personal friend. And I'm glad that he's there because you will see a complete change in this scenario. Now, what is going to happen? MSMEs is now going to be one of the biggest focus areas in India. The supply chains are moving in, and that is where you will see a large part of investment and growth coming up. In fact, I've already said, and that I'd say it on a public platform, in the next 24 months, the fastest growing segment in India will be the MSME segment. That is where Canada fits in yet again. The third, one of the largest single owners of real estate in India is a Canadian company. The Canada has already, they've realized that those 3 pillars strength which we have is now waiting for all of us to build on. And the opportunities available in the post-COVID world with India's positioning globally as it will be, I think it's a no-brainer to be here. So frankly, I see a huge opportunity is just a question of the next 3 to 6 months. You will see that emerging. And I personally think Canada is so well positioned to work into that system and see how we work together to take it on.
Thank you, Deepak, because there are also a few of the Indian companies, SMEs, which are in Canada, such as the IT. In fact, we've got Jamin Shah on the line as well. They're very worried about what the Canadian government is also doing for the Indian companies. But I think that we will take up at a later stage, when we will also hope to get Ajay Bisaria on another webinar and address these issues for the Indian companies in Canada. But as you said, Deepak, on a very positive note, with every challenge comes opportunity. And, as you said, there'll be a whole new sector, there'll be a whole new tomorrow. And the new normal, as they say, because it's never going to go back to the old normal. So we look forward to the new normal, where there will be many more opportunities. And with, people like you out there, Deepak, who are out there to help companies to get back on their feet, or for them to start into other avenues, I'm sure it's going to be a lot of opportunities coming up. And with that, I would, I have nothing more from my side. Sanjeev, if there's anything else, or Deepak, any words that you would like to say?
Yeah, just sorry, Deepak, just two words from my end. Would like everybody to stay safe, maintain social distancing. There has been advisory from all the governments. All of us should make sure that we follow those advisories and follow those guidelines which have been rolled out by respective governments. Over to you, Deepak. Thank you.
Sanjeev, I echo exactly what you said. But listen, I have to thank you for doing this. And Nadira, you have done a tremendous level of service.
Absolutely.
Really, absolutely exceptional. You and your entire team. And guys, I have to thank you all. I must tell you, and I genuinely believe this is a new beginning for you and us together, and especially for the India-Canada business corridor. Let's together take it on to completely new sets of areas to make it happen. Thank you, everyone, and please be safe and take care of your families.
Thank you, again. And for all those whose questions we couldn't answer today, or we weren't able to address, please do send in your questions again. We will see to it that we send it to Deepak and his team, and I'm sure that they will be addressed immediately. So Deepak, on behalf of those whose questions couldn't be answered, I will send it across to your office, and we will then wait your queries and send it back to you.
I'm so sorry we didn't answer them, but I definitely, personal promise, will be done.
Yeah,
Thank
sorry,
you again.
Deepak, that was not your fault. I think we didn't have enough time. There are several questions, but we will hand them over to you. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
And a big grateful thank you to everybody. We have almost 150 participants here, Nadira, as you would have seen.
Yes.
A big thank you to all the colleagues who have joined early morning in Canada and late evening in India. Most grateful, and thank you for participating in this webinar today. Stay safe.
Thank you.
And yeah, bye for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.